There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with a review of Edmund White's reading memoir, The Unpunished Vice, A Life of Reading, published in 2018. So, there were 3 strikes against me enjoying this book. Number 1, I've never really cared for Edmund White's fiction. I haven't read any for years, but the last one of his I read, I don't remember the title, and it's not important for this review. I don't think I finished. It was a very early bail, like the 1990s, people. And I don't remember loving any of his stuff that I've read. Number 2, any book I've read about reading, like a non-fiction book about the act of reading, has left me cold. I thought, why bother? I just want to give me a novel. I don't want to read a book about reading. That's ridiculous. I said 3. What was the other one? Okay, well, I'm just going to embarrass myself and say I think there was only 2. So those are the 2. I am delighted to tell you that this was a 5-star read for me, and I recommend it extremely highly. It has made me want to examine my prejudice against reading memoirs. If you have any good ones to recommend to me, please make a comment. And maybe give Edmund White's fiction another try. But I enjoyed this utterly. It's the kind of book that you can pick up and put down. You could pretty much open it at any page and just read a couple pages, put it down for a month. I didn't read it quite that slowly, but I did read it very episodically. And it is exactly that. It's a memoir of his reading. It is completely disorganized. Why would you want to organize a reading memoir? I don't want to say that it was a dog's breakfast. It wasn't. But I don't think he organized it with anything in mind other than what he felt like writing about that day. And it reads like that, and that is one of the most delightful things about it. For example, I vividly remember there was one chapter, like why even bother having chapters, where he said, "Oh, I'm looking over at the stack of books beside me as I write," and he wrote 20 pages about the authors, if he'd met them, what he thought of them, other books he'd written, and he just went down the stack of books that way, and it was just fascinating. Reading this book for me was like spending, about 10 hours at the dining room table with lots of alcohol, listening to Edmund White, who is now, I think, 80. Not pontificate. I don't feel like he pontificates. He can be really grumpy, which I enjoyed. I didn't always agree with his opinions. He's self-effacing. I think he called himself the queen of blurbs. He's always putting blurbs on every gay book that's been published in my lifetime, and I do think he did that too much. He talks about things he loves and really dislikes about his lover, who is also a writer, and why Michael Carroll, I believe is his name, and why his writing hasn't been as successful, and why he thinks it should be more successful. He does not try to be neutral about anything, and if he doesn't like somebody or somebody's writing, you certainly hear about it. He doesn't have much good to say about, for example, Judith Butler or post-structuralist literary theory, which I cheered for. And he writes a lot about his own gayness, his own queerness, and how that influenced his reading, and how he used to hide in his reading, and how he came out through reading, all of which I relate to 100%. By choice or by accident, based on what was interesting for him to write that particular day, there are full-length essays on Anna Karenina, I think it was Anna Karenina and not the other one by Tolstoy. His love of various authors that could be standalone literary critical essays. And maybe some of those I thought were a bit long when I wasn't interested in the writer. There was one I really skimmed near the end because I just am not interested in that writer. What was that? Curzio Malaparte. I read one book of his and I thought it was so racist I didn't want to read any more about him. And Edmund White would really scold me about such a politically correct opinion, and I would enjoy that conversation. But this was a delight. The way for me to sell you on this book is just to read you a paragraph. This is the conclusion to chapter 9, and like I say, I didn't really need chapter breaks, but anyway, and he's talking about not really loving reading the classics. I don't feel obliged to study the classics. My first translator in Paris, he was also a novelist, an essayist, and editor, Gilles Barbadet, was always reading Racine or Homer or Shakespeare or Blaise Pascal, and he seemed to find those classics nourishing. He dutifully kept a commonplace book, into which he copied great passages from great authors. I almost thought he was posing for his portrait for the French Academy, current or posthumous. Unlike me, he believed in the whole sacralized vocation of absorbing culture and making art. For me, fiction is the new poetry, a coterie pursuit read only by other adepts. I never complain about low sales figures or lack of fame. It strikes me as only natural that what we like is just for the initiated, the happy few. I don't question Gilles' sincerity or deep knowledge, and sometimes I think I should have followed his example of consulting only the blue-chip writers, mainly of the past, since time alone can vouchsafe for true quality. But I suspected those waters had been fished out. My library reflects my taste for the exotic, the minor, the unheralded, the neglected, or the still controversial new. Mixed in with poems by Tom Gunn and a bad biography of Robert Mapplethorpe are novels by Stacey D'Erasmo, Rachel Kushner, and Carson McCullers. People interested in putting together a very restricted canon of great books don't really like reading. True readers, among whom I have the impertinence to include myself, are always sniffing out more and more titles. Reading is a hobby that never grows stale, and an unpunished vice. So that's where the title comes from, boys and girls, and there's probably one or two points in that lovely paragraph I read to you that you might disagree with. And Edmund White would say that is a really good reason to give this book a try, and I would agree. Check it out. Thanks for watching.